If you watch me for any length of time, you know I simultaneously despise parasites in all form, whether they be like a tapeworm or a 39-year-old modding a subreddit in their parents' basement, but at the same time, we have to also appreciate them. Parasites are something that tend to latch onto a host and hold on for dear life because their own existence is dependent upon another organism. To a degree, pretty much all of our existence are dependent upon others, but typically we're just kind of eating them, and as non-parasites, at least we have the dignity to, not burden the organism with a slow draw over time. We sort of just consume them. Yes, it's safe to say that parasites are abhorrent and should be eradicated. Or should they? Hey YouTube, Roanoke Gaming. Alright, I am never doing that again. The question remains posed the same. Should we eradicate parasites entirely? And the answer is a resounding no, or at least not yet. Parasites and hosts have a bit of a complex relationship when it comes to them existing within us and we existing without them. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. As parasites enter our bodies, there can be many interactions from simply minimizing inflammation to literal gene methylation and transposons moving to new areas of a genome. In essence, parasites have more of an impact on our bodies than just something simply eating away at us while we exist. Now, this is not to say all parasites have some sort of benefit, many don't, but it is undeniable that something that appears horrible at first could be in some ways good for us. In the events of zoochosis, there is a very poorly understood parasitic outbreak at this current point in time that we need to stop and think, was this sent to us on purpose, or was it simply the result of some cataclysmically small happen chance that resulted in this creature that appears to definitely be sentient, affecting the surrounding local population of zoo animals? The answer is, we don't know. But first, this episode is sponsored by Factor. If you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you know I absolutely love Factor. Like, for real. Not because it's an integration, but because I actually buy Factor. Recently, I started getting the coffee protein shakes, and I took them on a road trip when I went out to Iowa, and they were a godsend as I could get my protein in while also getting a caffeine hit. When it comes to goals concerning protein intake like this, or just meals in general, you really don't need to look anywhere else. With over 35 meal variants, including keto, calorie smart, vegan, veggie, or double protein, which is what I go for, there literally is something for everyone. Along with that, you can get 60 add-ons to these delivered fresh, never frozen meals. And what's even better is you can enter your winter arc, as the youth are calling it, and eat healthy, emerging in the spring, totally shredded. You simply pop these meals for 2 minutes into the microwave, and then they are ready to eat, so they kind of eliminate the need for takeout. So, if that sounds like something that you would be interested in, then by heading to factor75.com or clicking the link below and using code Roanoke50, you can get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code Roanoke50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. All right, let's get back to it. You are a worker at a zoo, sent in to feed the animals, as Oliver is just simply known as the doctor, hired you to keep the animals in check. However, what you quickly find out is not only is there something very wrong with the animals, but there is also something squirming around within your own meat suit. So in today's episode, let's discuss the parasite from zoochosis, the potential origins of it, what may be its ultimate goal, and why it appears to alter the physiology of creatures it infects, and how this could be accomplished. But first, as always, I want to thank you guys for watching. Without you, none of this would be possible, as I would still be a super cool guy in a lab somewhere, but I would not be on YouTube. Arguably, it's not really that bad of a fate, but if you're ever wondering where these video ideas come from, I actually have played the entire game over on my gaming channel, Roanoke Games. It's been a lot of fun over there, so y'all should check it out. Also, come join my Discord as we do movie nights, and then I discuss it on this channel. Links for both in the description. But as you begin your first day on the job, the expectation is to be shown the ropes of the gig. However, what really happens is you are given a vaccine, as it's called. This vaccine is meant to protect you from any issues at the zoo, but the reality is, it actually kind of does. This will shed light later on the behaviors of the parasite and ultimately what its intentions are. Once being shown how to get food and feed the animals, and what sort of observations of them need to be taken, you then head out to begin your actual job for the night as Oliver takes off in his Eurotrash vehicle. I mean, look at that thing. Gross. Anyhow, entering the first enclosure, there are a multitude of different symptoms that can present, which indicate the body is actively dealing with some sort of infection. In some ways, the animal may be actually sick, and in other ways, it could just be currently infected by the parasite. Also, the plague seems to show up pretty regularly, which, I mean, the plague hasn't really gone anywhere, we just have antibiotics for it, but I don't think they should be infected this easily. Anyways, given enough time and enough interactions, eventually the parasite will emerge and begin attacking the other animals around it for the meat that they have, which the only meat that they have is their bodies. However, they will ignore you entirely except for occasionally getting angry at you for being in the way. So first things first, we need to discuss the symptomatic presentation in these animals. The pathophysiology in this one is quite interesting. These symptoms can be wounds, vomiting, diarrhea, increased body temperature, lethargy, making noises, but regardless, it all indicates that the body is currently engaged in an immunological response to something that has invaded their meat suits. Now the issue is, hilariously, the mammalian response to parasites is actually not all that great in a lot of ways. While some animals have different tools at their disposal, like maybe stronger macrophages or a certain blood type that kind of makes this parasite not want to attack, the parasites also have quite a few options as well to deal with this. Things like camouflage and mimicking their host cells, making it incredibly difficult for the host immune system to, kind of find and destroy them. Another issue that could arise is parasites can actually rapidly change the antigens on their surface, and the surface protein absolutely throws the immune system for a loop and can prevent targeted responses, such as immobilizing the parasite and then lysing it. But potentially one of the most beneficial but also creepiest is the fact that the parasite can subdue the immune system with a calming response. This one works in a multitude of ways, but the more interesting aspect of it is the actual genes of the immune cells can be influenced locally to be less reactive to the parasite's presence. And this is the part that is highly connected to today's topic, which we will get into when we talk about the morphological changes of the bodies and the animals afflicted with the parasite. Now, something that should be noted is the body does not just take this lying down. Even with the parasite and the ability that it has, the body is still launching a fairly valiant response to anything that is infecting it. It's important to remember that mammals aren't necessarily defenseless when it comes to parasite. It's just that our bodies and many other mammals are in the same boat. We have issues completely eradicating a parasite from our body. In terms of response, eosinophils, basophils, mast cells, neutrophils, natural killer T cells, monocytes, macrophages, and T lymphocytes all get involved in attempting to destroy the parasite. Some are better at more targeted responses, such as the NKT cells and neutrophils, while others may take a more blanketed approach, such as basophils and mast cells, who specialize in inflammation. But arguably, the most damaging when they get involved, but also kind of highly effective, are the eosinophils. These specific immune cells will release toxic proteins onto the surface of the parasite itself and reactive oxygen species, or ROS, which will typically help to lyse the parasite. Now, the main problem our immune system and the animal's immune systems would have is the sheer size and location of the parasite. Typically, when you are talking about microorganism parasites, the immune system cells are almost similar in sizing, meaning that they will have a greater impact on the parasite. However, with the Zoochosis parasite, as we will come to find out, it is massive, and its location appears to actually be either in the throat or stomach region itself. The problem with this is the immune system access and what it's even supposed to do when it gets to the organism it's trying to destroy. Because of it being in the stomach and throat region, the immune system would have a time and a half actually getting the proper cells to be able to access the parasite's body. Once on it, judging by what we will see, the fetal parasite as it appears is covered in what is likely a hard exterior. This armor-like covering would make it virtually impossible for anything like eosinophils to burn through. Inflammation is not going to touch it, and NKT cells are not going to be able to access any deeper than surface level, so it means they cannot cause damage to anything that might actually take this thing out. Essentially, for this particular species, the parasite is virtually unkillable for anything that has been afflicted with it. Now, as this creature digs deeper into the bodies of animals and in Paul, it's quite clear the body itself will attempt to launch an immune response. It would also seem, based on Paul's progression, that something known as a cytokine storm will ultimately be enacted. And what is a cytokine storm? I'm glad you asked. As your body becomes aware that it is losing the fight to an invader, or it hits a point where it's absolutely depleted, a systemic inflammatory response is then launched. This is essentially the nuclear option for your body that it has at its disposal that can in turn be life-threatening. Elevated levels of circulating cytokines begin tripping immune cell hyperactivation. Basically, the restraints are pulled off your immune system because whatever the controlled method of dealing with this invader is not working. Now, this is something you absolutely do want to avoid, as this can trigger cancers and autoimmune disorders, but this is your body's last resort. In Paul, we can see that the blood vessels all over his arms become damaged. Cysts can also be seen where the immune system battle is taking place, with swaths of cells having died, appearing to show that this is kind of a deeper issue. We can also assume this is happening all over his body as well. While the parasite within him is quite large, it appears that smaller parasites are released from the larger one that will then go on to affect other areas of the body. there is a hierarchy concerning the species, which at the bottom appears to be these smaller variants. These are the ones that you're kind of going to be mostly engaged in constant fighting with your immune system, but they will have a greater impact on gene expression, resulting in different structures growing later. Then you have the fetal parasite controlling them, which is located in the throat and stomach region. This appears to spawn these smaller parasites throughout the body, which are kind of like the peons, as you could say. And then at the top, you have the mother, and this is the queen, essentially. The mother parasite, mentioned all throughout the game, is ultimately seen if you end up doing the right things and ignore the wrong ones for long enough. And this is what controls all of the parasites within the zoo. This connection could be based on scent, but typically is administered through contaminated meat. Given this connection, other infected forms will actually not attack others who are infected, so either it's a top-down recognition or potentially some hormone signature is produced once infected to let other infected forms know locally not to attack, which is completely possible and is probably the case given that every animal will produce a type of scent when sick. The mother parasite is kind of shrouded in mystery, but what is known of this creature is it is not from Earth. It was discovered in 1967, where it was then brought to Pine Valley Zoo where it would be studied. The information gleaned was sometime in the past that it crashed into Earth, specifically hitting Greenland, where the meteorite was then contained in and would reside under a layer of ice. And this put it in pretty much a stasis for roughly about 8,000 years, keeping it from spreading. Arguably good for humanity, given that if it did spread during our more vulnerable era, when we were only using stone tools and spears, we would have had a hell of a time contending with this creature that then spawns from regular animals. The experimentations conducted resulted in the end of many humans and animals alike, all for the gain of information taken from genetic samples to help the military produce better countermeasures. The mother parasite produces litters that appear to be viviparous, meaning that they are born alive and no eggs are required from the looks of it. Some of these parasites naturally are able to breach containment given their smaller stature, and then will go on to infect other zoo animals. And seeing as this parasite is alien in origin, this produces a slew of different characteristics that we do not even see with the native parasites of this planet. This is not to say, though, that there are no similarities between them, and given that we can see quite clearly the structures formed of the animals who are infected, and if you get the really bad ending, the creature that Paul becomes, we start to see patterns which would indicate that specific genes are being altered in some capacity. As the parasite exists within the body, it's clear the immune system is not able to handle it. However, what I find interesting is how it can trigger certain immunological pathways that would be almost making it appear as a different disease. These symptoms are not indicative of any actual disease present, however, the disease may be present in the enclosure. This can lead to a comorbidity, such as being infected by the parasite, but also being infected by a literal disease that others have, but it's also possible that the organism itself is inspiring similar types of symptoms without the actual comorbidity being present. So it may do this to hide its presence by mimicking the diseases around it so that other animals will not become suspicious of it. And this does seem to suggest that wherever this parasite hails from, there must be some form of evolutionary advantage to hiding until it was ready to alter the animal entirely. This may indicate that this species that it was infecting had a level of sapience in order to identify what disease this even was, meaning that this strand of parasite had to contend with actual medical technology and was able to survive it. There may also have been other strands that didn't survive and were weeded out over time. And this would show that this individual species is likely sapient itself because of the level of intelligence needed in order to survive these parameters. And this would need to be reactive on a scale that goes beyond just simple alterations to protein structures on a cell's surface and enter the realm of actual thinking and counter-planning. So as the disease seeps deeper, the progression is quite clear. Infection, immune response, failing immune response, and then finally gene alteration. In the case of, say, the gorillas, for instance, we can see the infection keeps the same relative body structure, but it does, however, split the body on the coronal plane, separating it into the ventral and dorsal at the mouth point. And this type of new sectional cut of the body would be quite detrimental to any animal if not for the intervention of this parasite. But the question becomes, how does it actually do this? In any animal afflicted with this parasite, we see the structures that already exist on the body are usually enhanced in some way, and it is all based on the skeletal structure of the body. Teeth will typically be grown in great numbers, and regardless of the animal's naturally occurring metabolism or propensity as concerning like what it eats, meat will be preferred as desired by the parasite. Tusks on the elephant will appear all over the body. The antlers of the moose will grow wildly larger and more jagged. The neck of a giraffe will be brought into the mouth region, growing further down. The wings of penguins will grow quite large, allowing for flight. The teeth of the hippo will begin to grow in several locations. Wallabies, for some reason, will go completely invisible. That one's a little weird. But the point is, most of the structures in the body are already there, and the genetic information to grow these traits are housed within the DNA of this animal. So, what is really being affected by the parasite? First, I believe the majority of these growths are due to the parasite releasing toxins that actually affect the HOX genes specifically. Those are known as HOX genes. But what are the HOX genes? Not called HOX, but just so you know, it's not like called HOX, we call them HOX. But anyways, I'm glad you asked what those genes are. The HOX genes are what are known as the master regulators of development and are actually continually working in the background in kind of a restricted and more like regional pattern that is established after you have pretty much formed your body, but you're still gestating as an embryo. And this will give your body the structure that it has and are way more active while you're forming, but after this task is completed, they are sort of downshifted. And this is an incredibly important process, as if they are allowed to continue to have as much of a role as they once did, this could lead to the abnormalities such as one body part continuing to develop into another body part, and then transforming the complete identity of the tissue. This can cause things like extra limbs to form, missing body parts, or altered patterning in the body. And this is of great interest, as clearly this is what we were seeing. Taking a look at, say, the giraffe, for instance, several limbs will grow out of its body, giving it a more kind of centipede morphology, which is absolutely horrifying. And this is textbook HOX gene manipulation. Which, the next question is, okay, if the parasite can affect genes, what is the actual mechanism by which this is accomplished? You are asking a lot of great questions. This process is very likely due to the same process regular parasites on this planet can engage in, which is known as DNA methylation. So obviously we need to discuss what DNA methylation is, because you know, that's you can't just throw that word out there without talking about it. Essentially what happens is this is known as something that is epigenetic, which is the gene is expressed without altering the underlying DNA sequence, which is kind of important. So a methyl group is added to essentially a certain type of gene. Typically it's going to be at the 5-carbon position of a cytosine base, and this can change the activity of that gene without really kind of screwing with the genetics underneath. So it's basically resulting in gene expression due to the fact that there is a methyl group present. So now you know that's how it does it. Anyways, so also epigenetics just means, again, gene expression without altering the DNA itself. So typically this process causes sort of like genome-wide changes on DNA expression, which can have some pretty terrible downstream effects of altering the transcription factor of genes. So with earthbound parasites, this will result in a decrease of that gene being expressed, and in most cases, that affects the inflammation response. However, much like how a virus can transcribe its own genetic coding into the DNA host cells using reverse transcriptase, the parasite can affect this gene expression by releasing RNA polymerase compatible with the host cells of the animals on Earth. Now, is it using epigenetics to increase the gene expression, or is it just using its own transcription factors and then reading the HOX gene and then having it express? It's not really known which is which, but this can force fire the HOX gene to become involved, causing the cell to begin altering its behavior, which can have downstream effects. At first, this would not really have too much of an effect on the host, but as time continued, this will reach a critical point where the body structures are wildly altered, but not so different from what information could be contained within the body already. So as we have seen, this process can be calmed by giving the parasite meat, which is what it wants to consume already. It appears red meat specifically is what it is looking for, given that most of the animals you interact with in the zoo are actually herbivores, except for the penguins who eat fish. This further confirms that the parasite resides within the stomach and throat region and has access to any incoming meat. So the process to me looks like this, given what we know. The fetal parasite infects a host that it is compatible with, but the diet may not be. Given no nutrition is coming in, it will then reactivate the HOX genes within the body amongst several other genes, creating new structures and limbs, but these are not born out of some alien genetic coding, but are actually already naturally occurring within that animal already. This will alter the body, and with this imbalance of gene expression, the brain will also be affected to a degree, making them more aggressive. Eating meat will calm the parasite, but ultimately once the parasite has changed the body, it will remain as such unless cured. The cure is quite interesting, as after the parasite is kind of thrown up out of the body will go back to its original, it'll go back to its original structuring prior, and then they'll throw it up. So while this is a feature in-game, the reality is, once the body is altered to this point, it would be highly unlikely to return back to its standard structure. But I mean, it's a game mechanic, so it's allowed to be as such. which is where potentially the reality of the Hox genes being turned back on in greater capacity separates off the game itself. But it's not really that big a deal. It's just something to know. Once you grow a bunch of extra legs, they're not just going to disappear. Your body won't reabsorb them. But this leads us around to the ultimate question of what is the mother? The mother is an alien, which we already know. She is a highly intelligent species that, given her home planet, she must have been contending with another species that was fairly intelligent itself. She may drift from world to world, assimilating the species under like a one hive mind type of deal, creating lines of parasites, given that both male and female parasites are born, which can then create a colonizing population of this parasite that, can continue to infect and probably branch out and do its own thing as well. At some point or another, it ended up on a meteorite that then hit Earth. She appears to potentially be an aquatic species, however, similar to the order Nudibranchia, which are just basically the sea slugs on Earth. Possessing several growths and arms as well as being bright and colorful, this species, while not parasites on Earth, appears to be kind of parasitic concerning just specifically the mother. It should also not be discounted that on their home world, there may have been some benefit to these species, whatever they were attacking, to kind of coexist with one another, but on Earth, it has just turned full parasite. Ultimately, the structure of the body most affected by the invasion of this animal appears to be the skeletal system. With changes to the teeth, limbs, vertebral columns, tusks, and skulls, as well as antlers actually, it's quite clear the mother and her parasites cause massive growth in the system, leading to an animal to resemble the shape that it once was, but be severely altered and deformed by the reactivation of the Hox genes, as well as outside their standard functioning. All for the purpose of hunting down other animals and spreading this infection even further. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like would be great of you, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Roanoke Games, and Tales links, as well as the fact that I have new merch. Hey guys, so my new merchandise is finally launching for Halloween, like this shirt right here, which is pretty sweet, and a coffee mug, of course, and then also this shirt. Wow, would you look at that? Amazing. Also, that's me squatting with a coffee cup and a shirt, and then that is Professor Furface, and I have hoodies. So if you would like to support the channel, check out RoanokeMerch.com. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Feather. Thank you guys. Next, I'd like to thank our scientists, Dakota23, Invictus Echo, Lucian Dragon, Metric System, and Virix Hellstrom. Thank you guys as well. And to the rest of my patrons, I thank you. You guys are absolute ballers, and I love you. All right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.